Welcome to Radio Free Market. Our topic today is learning Austrian economics in a Keynesian world.
Hello, America and the world. This is Radio Free Market, and I am your guest host, Pat Barron, along with co-guest host, Drew Helm. Drew is a senior at the University of Iowa. He's an economics major, and Drew went to Mises University last year. So, Drew, you want to say hello?
Hello.
Drew and I are sitting here together in our vast office at the University of Iowa, and we have as our guest Dr. Peter Klein, who is a professor at the University of Missouri. Hello, Peter.
Hi there. How's it going?
We're going fine. Peter's the author of The Capitalist and the Entrepreneur, essays on organization and markets. He's the associate professor and director of the McKay Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership at the University of Missouri. He's an adjunct professor at the Norwegian School of Economics and Business Administration, and Peter teaches at Mises Academy and at Mises University. So today we're going to ask Peter, if we have time allowed, several sort of lines of inquiry. And number one, Peter, is we understand that you have initiated at the University of Missouri a doctorate program in Austrian economics. So I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, one of the important strategies for promoting any academic discipline, especially something like the Austrian School of Thought and Economics, is some kind of regularly available graduate training to bring up the next generation and to train scholars who will go on to be themselves researchers and teachers of others and so on. And that's always been a challenge for the Austrian school, being a little bit out of the mainstream of economic thinking. There have been many graduate programs in recent decades that have offered some training in the Austrian school, but it's been difficult for the Austrians to get a toehold, given that the sort of mainstream of the economics profession has chosen to go in a different way over the last several decades. Here at Missouri, I'm in a little bit of a fortunate place in that we have multiple economics groups or departments on campus. We have the traditional economics department located in the College of Arts and Sciences, but we also have a department in agricultural and applied economics, which is located in the College of Agriculture, Food, and Natural Resources, and that's the college in which I am housed. So we offer a PhD in applied economics, which has a little bit more flexibility, is a little bit more tolerant of sort of alternative perspectives than a more traditional program. I've been fortunate in being able to attract some PhD students who are extremely talented, who are interested in Austrian economics, who are writing their dissertations on Austrian topics, and will be receiving their PhDs here in this particular program at Missouri. And I've been fortunate to have great support from the administration and from colleagues. We offer a PhD seminar in the Austrian tradition, going over the major contributions of Austrian thinkers, looking at suggestions and new directions for going forward. And we also have an interest in various applied topics in business administration, in organization, in economic development, and the Austrian School offers a great platform for students who want to look into those topics. So we've been able to attract a good core of students who I think will be instrumental in moving things forward.
Well, that's fascinating, Peter. We've got just a few seconds left here. I wonder if when we come back, I'd like to talk to you a little more about what thesis your PhD students are working on that's more Austrian oriented.
Absolutely.
And, how many you have, and then if you could give us an idea of if somebody was interested in doing this at the University of Missouri, how would they apply? How long did you think that would take, and things like that. So, ladies and gentlemen, just stay on the line, because when we return after this short commercial break, we'll be talking more with Dr. Peter Klein about his PhD program and other topics. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Radio Free Market. This is Drew Yelm. I'm here with Patrick Barron, and we're talking with Dr. Peter Klein, the professor of economics at University of Missouri-Columbia, about the Austrian Economics PhD program they have down there at the University of Missouri. And before the break, we started talking about, the advantages of offering such a program. We were kind of wondering, so when did you first organize this program? How long has it been available?
Well, I've been at Missouri since 2002 and have been teaching various courses in the PhD program in applied economics, courses that are not exclusively focused on the Austrian school, but certainly have some Austrian content. Most of my own research is in the area of organization theory and applications of economic reasoning to management, to organization, to entrepreneurship, economic growth, and so on. And I've been doing a lot of teaching in those areas. Just in the last, about 3 years ago, we offered a PhD seminar in entrepreneurship theory, which had even more Austrian, and some of the students, including students that I had recruited here specifically to work with me, expressed interest in having some more Austrian seminars and courses. So we had a formal PhD course this past fall on various aspects of the Austrian tradition. So just to clarify, what we offer here is maybe better described as an Austrian emphasis or an Austrian concentration within a more mainstream-oriented PhD program. It's kind of I get a lot of questions from students, undergraduate students, and the laypersons who are interested in getting some formal graduate training in Austrian economics, asking, what are the best Austrian programs? Where can I go to get a degree in Austrian economics? Well, there really isn't quite such a thing. The Austrian school is a particular approach or tradition within economics, and there are Austrian approaches within business administration, even within sociology and history and so on. But, the academic credentials that somebody would be seeking if they were going in that direction would be a PhD in economics or applied economics, a PhD in business administration, and so on. So we don't offer an Austrian degree. What we offer is an applied economics degree in which students can receive a lot of training, both formal coursework, one-on-one peer interaction, working with me and other faculty who are interested in Austrian things, as part of their training.
So I guess another follow-up to that, so with it being economics program with more of an Austrian focus, what's the methodology like? When you talked about in Capitalist Entrepreneur how the mathematics when you went to grad school for economics was kind of daunting, but Austrian economics is not defined by mathematics because it's more of a school of thought that uses a priori reasoning. How would you, characterize the coursework with regards to the Austrian method at University of Missouri?
Yes, that's a good question. I mean, as you point out, the economics profession within the last several decades, really since about World War II, has become increasingly sort of formal and technical, using the language of mathematics and advanced statistical analysis to express its conclusions, whereas the Austrian tradition, following Karl Menger's approach, has tended to emphasize verbal reasoning, qualitative over quantitative historical analysis, though there's plenty of room for quantitative historical work as well. And in that sense, some of the Austrian literature is a little bit out of step with kind of the current fashion in terms of the modes of expressing the ideas. That does pose a challenge for people working today and seeking to be successful in academia who are working in the Austrian tradition, because there is this, sort of disconnect between the way Austrians typically reason, the way they typically express themselves in their writings, and what the mainstream, most prestigious journals and institutions tend to favor. Now, the way that we approach that here is that, the students getting degrees in one discipline or another here at Missouri are ultimately being awarded the degree by their home institution. So I have some students I'm advising who are in the PhD program in agricultural and applied economics, And so they take the standard set of courses in that department, which include courses in mathematical methods, courses in statistical analysis, and so on. We augment that training with additional readings and lectures and discussions and activities presenting the alternative Austrian tradition and explaining how these traditions relate to each other and so on. I have another student who's pursuing a PhD in political science. So his PhD will be awarded by the Poli-Sci department. He will take the required core courses in political science, which will include some mathematical reasoning, courses in game theory and quantitative methods and so on. So we encourage all of our students to be, conversant in the discourse in, the current modes of discourse in their own discipline, but to recognize what are the strengths and weaknesses of those particular modes of expression, to sort of go beyond the status quo to thinking, more deeply in a more penetrating way, not just about theory, but also about method, language, technique, and so on. So, well, you said that, in recent decades, modern economics has kind of, transitioned to more of a regimented model system, and the journals and kind of academia has kind of swayed that way. So, right. I guess what's the future for Austrian economics in academia, with that being the case? That's a great question. I mean, I don't know for certain. I'd say there are two schools of thought here. With regard to strategy for moving forward. You could call one of them sort of an internalist model and one an externalist model. So there are some Austrian economists who think that the best way to move forward is to try to establish a toehold within mainstream academia and, gradually, incrementally, step by step, try to increase the amount of Austrian content in graduate programs, to publish more articles in mainstream journals and books with mainstream publishers, developing Austrian themes and so on, and hope to kind of achieve some change. Maybe revolution is too strong a word, but try to bring about some change, working within the existing institutions. And as your question implies, and it's worth bringing out more explicitly, academia, like many other professions, is, it's big business, right? There's a lot of money that supports mainstream universities, journals, conferences, programs, and so on. And like any other profession, it has its own rules, its own formal and informal norms and standards. There's a lot of inertia within academia, just as there is within other kinds of professions, maybe even more so, because academia is largely isolated from sort of competitive market pressures. Most of the research is subsidized or directly funded by the state. You have employees with lifetime tenure and so on. So change tends to be very slow and gradual. Now, partly because of that, there's another approach that says probably the best way to achieve long-term change in academia, to bring the Austrian school back into prominence, is to try kind of an end run. In other words, not to place a lot of faith in the existing institutions of academia, but to try to build alternative institutions, private programs, non-traditional programs. You have lots of organizations and institutions, like the Mises Institute, for example. Patrick mentioned in the introduction that I do some teaching for the Mises Academy, which is a set of online short courses in Austrian and other themes offered, privately and for profit by the Mises Institute. If you look at the higher education market these days, the fastest growing segments are the non-traditional, for-profit, groups like the University of Phoenix and DeVry University and so on. There's been an explosive growth in those kinds of non-traditional institutions. Now, they have a long way to go before they become Harvard or Princeton or Iowa or Missouri, but who's to say that in a few decades, we dinosaurs in the traditional institutions won't be the ones on the outside looking in, with alternatives, leading the way. So maybe another strategy is, rather than try to place Austrian professors at Stanford or try to encourage Austrians to get PhDs at prestigious mainstream institutions, is to encourage the development of this kind of alternative, almost a counterculture, if you will, largely which is already flourishing to some degree on the internet. And of course, technological change, the dramatically lower cost of delivering educational content thanks to new technology makes this alternative counterculture strategy a lot more feasible and potentially more appealing. But like anything else, there are strengths and weaknesses of both of these strategies, and there are people who are actively pursuing a variety of different approaches for moving the Austrian school forward. And I'm happy to let 1,000 flowers bloom and sort of see where things go.
Well, Peter, this is Pat again, and I can tell you that cost of university education, traditional university education, is something that is very burdensome to the students.
You're absolutely right, and
terrible.
Students are coming out of school 4 years, 5 years, 6 years with huge amounts of consumer debt. There's a recent study that has come out by a couple of sociologists, one at New York University, based on extensive interviews and surveys of students, claiming that even at elite institutions, after 4 or 5 years of college work, students score no higher on tests of analytical reasoning, creative thinking, and writing ability than they did before they started. So, parents and other funders are increasingly starting to ask, are we really getting our money's worth? And it's not at all clear that they are.
All right. Well, this is fascinating, Peter, and we're coming to the end of our second segment, and we're talking with Dr. Peter Klein of the University of Missouri. This is Pat Barron with Drew Helm, and stay tuned. We'll be right back. This is Pat Barron, and this is Radio Free Market. I'm here at the University of Iowa with Drew Helm, and Drew and I are interviewing Dr. Peter Klein, professor down at the University of Missouri, just south of us. And Peter, what we'd like to do in this segment is move along to our second topic, which is to get your experiences as a member or on the staff, as the case may be, of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. And first of all, I just wonder if you could just give us some background of when you were there and who you reported to, and just sort of I'm just fascinated by, what is the structure of the
Right.
Council of Economic Advisors?
Sure. Well, the CEA is an unusual organization in the sense that it's very small compared to other government bureaucracies of its type. Actually, the council itself consists of only 3 individuals, 3 members, who are typically professors or other academic researcher types who serve on short-term 1 to 2 year appointments. Ben Bernanke was a chairman of the council and a member of the council before becoming head of the Fed. Gregory Mankiw, the well-known Harvard professor and textbook writer, was a CEA chair. Paul Krugman was a member of the council in years past, and so on. A lot of sort of well-known economists, both in academia and in other organizations, have done sort of a stint as council members. My own story, I was not a member of the council, but I was the next level down, what used to be called senior staff economist, and is now called senior economist. And there were about 15 or 20 of us, each assigned to responsibilities on particular subject matters. I was dealing with regulation, industry, studies, innovation, technology, that sort of thing. At the time, I was a professor at another university, not before I came to Missouri, and I took a 1-year leave of absence to do a stint on the council. This was in the summer of 2000, and I stayed until the first few months of 2001, a little bit less than a year. And my peers, the other senior economists like me, were mostly professors or, in some cases, economists at other government agencies or organizations who were doing a short-time rotation on the council. There's some junior economists and research assistants and staff and so on, but overall it's a pretty small outfit, maybe no more than 50 or 60 people in total. The council was set up after World War II, to give, in principle, kind of uncensored advice directly to members of the executive branch, to the president and the vice president and so on. The theory was that there were a lot of economists in Washington, D.C., but they were all attached to particular departments or agencies like the Department of Commerce or the Defense Department or the Federal Trade Commission, each of which had a particular agenda associated with its own institution or bureau. The idea was to have a smaller group of professional economists who were not attached to any one particular interest group in Washington, and who could be kind of more of a liaison between the academic community and the policy-making authorities. In other words, policies are be considered on issues X, Y, and Z. What is the consensus of professional researchers and scholars out of government who have worked on these particular topics? What do they think is the strengths and weaknesses of policy A versus policy B? It was a very interesting experience because unlike being a professor where you tend to have knowledge that is very deep but not very broad, professors spend years, writing an article or a book on some pretty narrow and obscure topic that only, 5 other people in the world are interested in. In a position like working with the CEA, one is forced to become very broad but not so deep. In other words, the portfolio of issues and topics and projects is extremely large, and one doesn't have time to do in-depth research on any one of them, but rather to you have a short amount of time to sort of get quickly up to speed on various things and to try to provide a little bit of sanity to some of the discussions that go on within the bureaucracy. People have often asked me, do you feel like you did a lot of good when you were there? Is it possible for sound-thinking economists to have an influence on the policy process? I have to give kind of a guarded and cautious answer. I think maybe the best that you can say is that, people like me can have a role in, maybe preventing some really bad things from happening, squashing some really horrible ideas that percolate up from one, political interest group or another. The problem with economists and other advisors to government officials is that many times their advice is heeded when it agrees with what the decision makers have already decided, and it's used to buttress or to justify the decisions that policymakers have already made. When the advice is contrary to the wishes of the policymaker, then that advice is ignored and the report's buried. So it's a kind of groups like the CEA tend to be used somewhat opportunistically by the officials to whom they report. But in principle, they can make the discussion a little bit more elevated than it otherwise would be.
Well, we're coming up here on a break here on Radio Free Market, so please stay tuned. After the break, we'll continue on talking with Dr. Peter Klein. Please stand by.